Tolkien's world has fascinated generations. He created it with the intention to form his own mythology, and the result gave form to a whole genre. The Hobbit, or later The Lord of the Rings, were by no means the first fantasy books in history, but probably among the most influential ones, with The Hobbit also being a very early example of the genre too. Tolkien's influence is undeniable, and the huge success in the 60s slowly pushed the fantasy genre into the mainstream. You often find ideas of Tolkien in many other later works, especially through Dungeons and Dragons. They were developed further and widely spread even into video games. You often find dwarves, elves, orcs, trolls and humans in this genre. A group of heroes is formed and all have their roles. The noble warrior, the ranger, the hunter and of course the wizard. Magic often plays a big role, and in modern fantasy RPGs even the non-wizards have abilities that seem magical in nature. Magic was always a fascinating element, but how does magic in Tolkien's world work? Jojo45180 asked, can you explain the nature of magic? A good question, but what's magic? The word's origin is complex. We find it in Latin and ancient Greek, and it seems that it got there from ancient Persia, which is about where Iran is today. It's probably Proto-Indo-European origin. It means to be able to, and often describes phenomena that can't be explained by the available knowledge of its present. Therefore, it's often associated with the supernatural. Remember my wizards video? The wiz in wizard means wise, so someone with deep thought and knowledge. And Tolkien's word Istari reflects that too. It means those who know, so knowledge is an essential part of magic. In addition, magic has a source, someone or something that is behind the magic. The caster of the spell, you could say. In Tolkien's world, magic is used quite rarely. Even Gandalf, as the wizard in the group of heroes in The Hobbit, doesn't use it that much. Same in the Fellowship of the Ring. When I was much younger, I always wondered why the wizards in Lord of the Rings don't cast spells that much. The answer lies in the nature of magic in Tolkien's world, and it's a quite complex topic, which I can only scratch in this format, but I'll try my best. Tolkien does not really explain much about magic, but I personally would split it into 4 categories: knowledge, the power of words, the seen and the unseen, and special cases. Keep in mind that this is my interpretation. Also, you could say that magic is tied to the different peoples of Arda: Ainur, elves, dwarves and men. Everyone except Ainur and elves were originally even excluded from using magic by Tolkien, but that's not what we see in the book's lore. We come back to this later. Let's start with knowledge. If we would travel back in time for a couple of thousand years and show people our smartphone or even a flashlight, it would be magic to them. As mentioned, magic often describes phenomena that can't be explained by the knowledge currently available. If we wield a flashlight, we are suddenly those who know. The core of this magic isn't actually supernatural, but part of the nature that was just hidden from the people of this time. This is basically the case for almost all magic in Tolkien's universe. Using a flashlight has nothing magical in our time because we have the knowledge. Of course, there are still elements in Tolkien's world that are also magical for us with our modern times knowledge, but there are also elements that we can easily understand. Examples from Tolkien's world would be the explosion of the Hornburg, or Hornburg, as someone from Rohan would pronounce it. The books don't explain what caused it. Aragorn just comments it with devilry of Saruman. The films expand a bit on it, and we see Saruman making something like gunpowder. Even though this is not in the books, it's greatly plausible. Saruman, as an Ainu, an advanced angelic spirit being, has simply the knowledge to create something that can blast a hole into a big wall. Same in our modern times. It's nothing unusual and nobody would call it magic. Even Gandalf has this knowledge, it seems, but he used it for fireworks instead. Gandalf also could use his staff to emit light, basically a flashlight, that for some people might be magic, but for him was just his knowledge that he used. The next point is a bit difficult to explain, but also expands the idea of knowledge further. Tolkien's world has a seen and an unseen component. When Bilbo or Frodo use the One Ring to become invisible, they are actually just moved into the unseen part of it. I usually call it the unseen realm, but that's not really an official term. I think Tolkien calls it the Wraith world or simply the unseen. However, a lot of aspects of Tolkien's universe have both the seen and the unseen. In some cases of magic, the unseen aspect was changed or manipulated, which has an effect that could be described as supernatural by those who don't have access to the unseen realm, but by those who have, it's just natural. So it's again about knowledge, but also about the ability to see the unseen. I assume the Ring of Power and the One Ring are examples for the manipulation of the unseen. I don't know for sure, but I assume also Elvish weapons, because besides the Ainur, that are spirit beings like Sauron, also some elves can see the unseen realm and probably manipulate it if they have seen the light of the two trees of Valinor. I made a video about the two trees in case you're interested. A complex topic too. The connection to the two trees is quite interesting. I assume it's them who shed a light into the unseen, but elves also have some abilities given by their nature that allow them to do things or improve their arts so much that others would call it supernatural. Elves are of course still limited through their needed physical form, but we have many examples where they become very powerful or able to create very powerful artifacts. The 3 Silmarilli or the 3 Elvish Great Rings of Power come to my mind. Elves seem to have much more potential here than, for example, men. This also is connected to what I said about how magic is differently tied to the different species of Arda. Ainur, in contrast, don't have a limitation by their physical form and can wield their spirit freely and see the unseen in much detail. What they do can be usually described as magical, and we know that they can change the existing world or reality depending on their authority and power. For example, Gandalf is quite limited in his form as Istar, but even in this form he can still manipulate and wield fire and lightning. For example, in the books, he fights the Nazgul on the Weathertop, days before Aragorn arrived there with the hobbits. That's also the reason why there are only 5 Nazgul attacking the group. If we come back to the unseen, another interesting example comes to my mind. Glorfindel looking at the Morgul knife. In case you wonder, this whole scene was changed in the films and Glorfindel replaced with Arwen. He says to Aragorn when he found them after the events of the Weathertop, "There are evil things written on this hilt," he said, "though maybe your eyes cannot see them." Glorfindel has most likely seen the two trees of Valinor, and it seems he can see writings on the hilt of the Morgul knife that define the evil nature of this weapon. Men, in contrast, also hobbits are counted towards men, can't see them. However, Glorfindel was empowered and he became more than just an elf, but I think this still explains my point about the unseen quite well. Another interesting detail is again from the scene on the Weathertop, shortly before Frodo gets stabbed by the Morgul knife. Desperate, he drew his own sword, and it seemed to him that it flickered red as if it was a firebrand. Frodo used the One Ring, and in the Wraith world, Frodo drew Sting, which now has this special red glow in this realm. Also, the weapons of the Witch King are described with a special pale glow too, and as mentioned, Glorfindel can even read the unseen letters on the Morgul knife. So the magic part seems to be just a manipulation of the unseen part of the sword. What rules exist there, we don't know. This also brings us to the next point, the power of the word. Something was written on the Morgul knife. Words can be insanely powerful in Tolkien's world if spoken, sung, or written with authority, especially the oath. An example would be the Oathbreakers. They are related to the Dunlendings and lived in the White Mountains, but once promised Isildur to follow him into the War of the Last Alliance against Sauron. They swore an oath to him at the Stone of Erech. It's sadly missing in the films. It was a big spherical black stone half buried into the earth and had the size of a man. It's hinted that Isildur brought it from the original Dunedain kingdom Numenor. Dunedain means Westman, and placed it there on his landing. For the mountain tribes it became a mystical stone, and some believed it once fell out of the sky. However, it was also a symbol of Isildur's lineage and his authority as a descendant of Numenorian kings, so a very special stone. In addition, Isildur was also the king of Gondor, together with his brother Anarion at this time. A Numenorian king could call upon Eru, which is the one transcendent god of Tolkien's universe, for an oath. Even the ruling stewards of Gondor could do this. An example would be the oath of alliance between Gondor and Rohan by the ruling steward Cirion and Eorl, who will become the first king of Rohan, 500 years after Earnur, the last king of Gondor, died or vanished to be precise. These oaths had a special weight, as we can see in the case of Isildur and the Shadowmen or Oath Breakers. When Isildur, within the events of the Last Alliance, summoned the Mountain Men to follow them into the war against Sauron, they hid in the mountains, not answering Isildur's call, breaking their oath. Isildur now cursed them to find no rest until their oath is fulfilled, and Eru accepted this curse because there was justice in it, and with this authority behind it, they swore an oath and broke it, becoming the Oath Breakers. Isildur was the king of Gondor and demonstrated his lineage and authority through the stone of Erech, and so after breaking the oath, Isildur's words became reality, putting the Oath Breakers into this unusual state of ghostly beings that can't find rest, even you could say defying death itself. There are more examples. The world was created through the music of the Ainur, and song was part of that music. Singing has a special weight in the nature of magic in Arda. For example, Tom Bombadil sings to drive out the Barrow-wights, which are powerful evil spirits, and his song has authority over them. In the First Age, we also have Sauron and Finrod Felagund, which is Galadriel's oldest brother, fighting against each other by using songs of power. Quote from the Silmarillion: "Thus befell the contest of Sauron and Felagund, which is renowned. For Felagund strove with Sauron in songs of power, and the power of the king was very great, but Sauron had the mastery." Another impressive example was Luthien, who was half-elf, half-Maya. She was able to sing Sauron's master Morgoth, the most powerful Valar, which are angels or Ainur of highest rank, into sleep. She also competed with Sauron using songs of power, and together with the help of the powerful great hound Huan, she defeated Sauron, who surrendered and gave Luthien the control over the small island Tol Sirion that he had conquered. Coming back to Ainur, we also find spells. Gandalf seals a door inside of Moria with a spell when they flee from the orcs. The Balrog casts a counterspell, and Gandalf tries to counter it by speaking a word of command, but it nearly broke him due to the great power of the Balrog. It also resulted in the door bursting into pieces. Gandalf even needed a short break after that. Again, we see the power of word and how powerful beings as Gandalf can use words to command things. Maybe less impressive, but also connected to the power of word, were the doors of Durin, where you have to speak friend, Mellon, in Sindarin to open them. Another important example that I must mention are the writings on the One Ring, which clearly state the nature of the ring, but are in most cases hidden. Quite similar to the Morgul knife, which also have words in the unseen realm on it. So it's even a combination of two categories. From my perspective, the power of a word seems to be the most potent magic. Of course, from the perspective of an Ainur, it's not magical at all, but natural instead. The most powerful spirit beings use this to shape and change the world, but that's their nature, and it can have huge impact and even change fate. Think about how the creation of the One Ring shaped the fate of 2 ages, so about 5,000 years of history. And then, at the very end, we have special cases. I think here we can also come back to how the peoples of Arda have access to different magic, you could say. We already talked about Ainur and elves, but also the dwarves are clearly able to create magical artifacts. How they do it is not really known. For example, Narsil was created by the dwarves, but also the mysterious dragon helm of Dorlomin, which magically protected the wearer from wounds and struck fear into the hearts of enemies on sight. For example, Turin wore it. How this helm worked is not known. There were runes on it, so I assume it's connected to the power of words. Dwarves could not see the unseen, and maybe they had their own ways of magic. Same with the invisible dwarf runes or the hidden backdoor of Erebor. As mentioned, men also had no access to the unseen, except when they used the Great Rings of Power, but they also had powerful artifacts. In the Lord of the Rings book, the hobbits find Numenorean weapons of the kings and lords of Arnor in the Barrow Downs. These weapons were able to even hurt and weaken a Nazgul as powerful as the Witch King, so they must have been special, or you could say magical. How men were able to create weapons like these is not known. I assume it could be similar to dwarven magic. Tolkien originally planned for men to not have any access to magic at all, but that brings a lot of hard-to-resolve conflicts into the lore. My theory is that men and dwarves have some access to the power of words and use this to enchant their weapons to some degree, maybe through runes, combined with knowledge, craftsmanship, technology, and the use of special materials. And maybe, even though they can't see the unseen, they maybe can indirectly manipulate it through special techniques and the power of words. Another special case is that some people, even men, have the power of foresight, like Malbes the Seer or Aragorn's grandfather Dirhael. How they got this ability and how it works is unknown too. Maybe the Valar granted some people visions of the future. Also, elves can have foresight. In the case of Círdan, we also know that he once had a vision of the future sent by the Valar from Aman, and even was blessed by them with foresight after that. My last and famous special case is Beorn, the skin changer. Skin changers could transform from men into a specific animal, like a bear in Beorn's case. Actually, Beorn and his descendants are the only known skin changers, and they could only transform into a bear. Thoringwethil, the woman of Secret Shadow, was a messenger of Sauron. She could also be a skin changer or even a Maya, and was able to transform into a great bat. The Silmarillion uses the term vampire. How the transformation of skin changers works exactly is not known. Ainur, as spirit beings, can of course change their physical appearance relatively easy. Sauron was a master of changing his form. However, here is the explanation that they by nature don't have a physical body, but enough power and authority to create one following certain rules. In the case of Beorn, that is different. He is not an Ainu, but still able to change his physical form. Maybe it's a curse, or simply their nature as species. Another explanation could be that this character and the idea behind it is from The Hobbit, which was originally not part of the Lord of the Rings universe. Tolkien changed a few things in its second edition of The Hobbit around 1951, a few years before The Lord of the Rings was released, which also explains why The Hobbit has a lot of unusual magical elements, like the enchanted river in it. However, it's also important to have some mysteries in your world when you want to create mythology. I think this could be the case here. Overall, magic is tied to knowledge that is hidden for others, and in a world where a being's power can be vastly different compared to others, these contrasts often generate the illusion of supernatural elements or magic. From Eru's perspective, things look different than from Sam's, and when magic is mainly a difference in knowledge and perspective, and only partially ability-based, everyone has to some degree access to it. Everyone who can use words and can possess the needed authority. I know that there is much more to explore here, but I think this should answer the original question about magic's nature in Tolkien's universe detailed enough. It's about those who know and those who don't. I will probably revisit this topic someday and present you a more detailed look into this vastly complex topic. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. It was quite difficult to make because the topic is so complex and wide. If you liked it, please consider pressing the like button and leave a comment. I for sure forgot something. What is your favorite part of Tolkien's universe that includes magic? Feel free to post your lore question into the comment section too, and maybe check my older lore videos. In the unlikely case you want to subscribe, consider pressing the bell. My upload frequency isn't that high, and it increases the probability of you getting notified if I upload something new. I will also continue with lore videos on my channel. Haven't decided what topic yet, but the list is long. As mentioned in the community post, this month was really bad view-wise on my channel, but it seems to slowly getting better. I hope it fully recovers soon. Again, thank you for watching and goodbye.